Well, hi everyone. Thanks for joining us. And my name is Greg, and I work on the water efficiency team at Marin Water. Um, and just if you're listening and you don't live in our service area, tune into your own water utility so that you can see what kind of programs they offer, because the chances are they have some similar programs to Marin Water that you can take advantage of when you're doing landscape projects. So without further ado, I'm going to dive in. So I'm just going to do a little intro and set a little bit of context, and then move on to some of the gardening resources that we have available for customers, which would be actually useful for almost anyone in the Bay Area. And then specifically Marin Water's incentive programs that you can take advantage of. All right. So there we are. We're just north of San Francisco. And so Marin Water is one of the oldest, or the oldest municipal water district in California. And all of our water is locally sourced. About 3/4 of it actually is rainwater runoff collected in 7 reservoirs. 5 of those are right there in the Mount Tam watershed, and then 2 just a little further north. And then the rest of our water is purchased from Sonoma Water in Sonoma County, and that comes from Lake Sonoma and Lake Mendocino via a pipeline from the Russian River. And a lot of that water is purchased during the winter months when flows in that river are a lot higher, and it doesn't affect their water supply for us to purchase that water. So we're serving about 190,000 people. And then we also protect and preserve the Mount Tam watershed itself. So I just wanted to set a little bit of context to what we're going to be talking about today. And what you see here is a lovely chart. I'm somebody who does like charts, but I think this might be my only one. So the blue line is per capita water use. So that's gallons per person per day. From 2000 to 2022. And then the gray dashed line is population. So the good news is that we've seen a pretty significant decrease in per capita water use over time, from around 150 gallons per person per day down to the current level of about 100 gallons per person per day, which is pretty good. And this is district-wide use, not just residential use. So it does include large landscape irrigation, commercial businesses, and that kind of stuff as well. When you look at residential only, it's a lower number. So it does fluctuate a lot from year to year, and it tends to go down when we have severe droughts, as we experienced in 2021, and then sometimes it rebounds. So we're hoping that doesn't happen. A lot of this has come about due to changes in plumbing standards, but as you'll see on the next slide, a lot of it is due to our landscape water use as well. So what we see here is an approximate percentage of water use for indoor use versus outdoor. Indoor use would be showers, toilet flushing, faucet use, laundry, that kind of stuff. And outdoor use, primarily irrigation, but also swimming pools and things of that nature. And so during the summer months, up to 2/3 of our water is used outdoors, which is significant. And it's probably the area where we have the most potential to be able to reduce our water use. Indoor use in Marin County is amongst the lowest in California, which is something we can all be proud of. It's about 30 gallons per person per day, which is really good. So we're not going to dwell on this. We're going to move forward into what I do, which is, or our team does, which is trying to help people use water efficiently. It doesn't mean we can't use it in how it's intended to be used and enjoy it. It's a wonderful resource. It's really about how we can use it efficiently so we can make that resource last as long as possible. So our primary, you'll see a few URLs. Our website is marinwater.org, and then /no water wasted will take you to the water efficiency team's site. What you see here is just some of the activities that we do. We do have a conservation assistance program where we come out to customers' homes. We offer free plumbing fixtures such as shower heads and faucet aerators, and also hose nozzles. We're going to talk about incentives and rebates and some of the resources, educational resources we have. We also do some school education. So we take classes up to the watershed and present in their classrooms to teach them about their water supply. And then we also do enforcement. So a little bit of water waste enforcement is sometimes necessary. Just because it doesn't really fit into the rest of what I'm going to talk about, I just wanted to let you all know about our conservation assistance program. So you can have us come out to your home, and we will do this indoors and or outdoors. Look at your fixtures, look at flow rates and appliances, and then look at your irrigation scheduling and the efficiency of your irrigation system to see if there's any improvements we can make. So this can be a good thing for any homeowner to do, just to kind of get a benchmark of where you are and try and set yourself up for success using less water and having a lower water bill as a result. All right, so I'm just going to walk through some of the gardening related resources that we have. We have a page dedicated to this called WaterSmart Gardening. So marinwater.org/WaterSmart Gardening will take you there. And what you'll see is a little page like what you see on the screen here. These are buttons across the top, which will jump you down to that section. So gardening inspiration, plant selection, irrigation tips, fire safe landscaping, a few resources for hiring a landscape professional, which can be challenging. They're busy people. And then also some resources for rainwater and gray water, which is exciting stuff if you're in a position to be able to put in a rainwater harvesting system or a gray water system. So I'm just going to walk through a couple of what I think are the key resources we have on offer, starting with our wonderful Watershed Approach to Landscaping handbook. So this is a book which was put together with staff here and local landscape professionals. People from the California Native Plant Society helped and provided input. And it has a ton of information in it, from using rainwater in your garden to some basics of irrigation and basics of landscape design, including some plant lists. So it's a really good place to start if you are thinking about a landscape project at home. So as well as the handbook, which you can download for free as a PDF, and if you come into the office, you can collect a hard copy as well. And then we have a companion class series at the College of Marin, which is taught by one of the people that had input into the handbook, and then somebody else as well. There's a series of 6 classes at College of Marin through their community education program. Those are currently running, so they've already started, and the 4 classes are full. It's a great program. It's very popular. And they will be running again in the early spring, and I believe they'll open those up for registration in January. So we'll be promoting those. Look out for those if you want to take a deeper dive into some of the subject matter in that handbook. Okay, so I mentioned our customer assistance program, and we have a somewhat similar program where we work with the Marin Master Gardeners, and you can actually have 2 Master Gardeners come out to your home, and this is very much just outdoor focused, and look at your irrigation system and your plants. The focus is intended to be kind of showing you your water meter and your irrigation system and looking for leaks and things. But a lot of these folks who are using this program for their volunteer hours to be a master gardener have a lot of plant knowledge. And so it can be a really excellent resource just to spend an hour or so with a couple of master gardeners to get some inspiration. So speaking of inspiration, we are also involved in a regional garden tour called the Eco-Friendly Garden Tour. So this is managed by Sonoma Water through the Sonoma Marin Saving Water Partnership. The Sonoma Marin Saving Water Partnership has an excellent website with a lot of resources in itself. And this tour happens each May. It's self-guided, and they normally put about 20 or so gardens on, and a handful of those would be in Marin, Novato South, and tend to be focused on water efficient plants, which is suitable for our area. So lots of California natives and Mediterranean plants. And then a lot of them will have some features like rainwater harvesting and rain gardens and those kind of things. So it's a really nice way to actually see what some people have done and get some inspiration from it. It was online for a few years, but it is now back in person. So we're glad to see that happening. We were just chatting before the webinar started about a little bit about irrigation. And one of the things we find frequently is just this misinformation about how to properly schedule irrigation. One of the services we have is our weekly watering schedule. And so during the irrigation season, which is typically from about April to October, when we actually need to irrigate, we use local weather station information, and then we publish run times on our website that you can use for your system. It's intended to be a starting point because all landscapes and irrigation systems are slightly different. So we've had to make some general assumptions, but it's a really science-based starting point for you to program your irrigation system. So that is available through the WaterSmart gardening page. And you can sign up for a weekly email to remind you to go look at it. All right, and in that email, we also put a plant of the week to give you a reason to drop into Sloat and purchase some plants. Okay, so those were the resources I would recommend checking out on our website. So hopefully you'll have a few minutes to do that. And there are lots more besides. So I'm going to move on to our incentive programs. And
yeah, I was going to pop in just for a second to
absolutely, yeah.
That's a good question or two. We don't have too many coming in, but if anyone definitely has some questions, send us our way so we can talk about it. I just had one about for if you're setting up a gathering system to gather some rainwater and be able to utilize it in your garden, which is a great idea, and I think I've done it as well. I've always kind of had the question of, is there a somewhat kind of guidance on a safe limit of time that you should be keeping your rainwater? If you gather your rainwater, is there a time that you should maybe start using it by, or think about if it does get a little bit, is there any danger to keeping it for too long or letting stuff grow in it? I know also mosquitoes are definitely a thing that we have to worry about. So if you have any time.
No, that's a great question. And yeah, there's guidance that we have. So we generally kind of recommend going by the California Plumbing Code, especially if you want our rebate. But yeah, if you are collecting rainwater, the key things to do are to try and screen it as it comes into the container. So normally just some kind of mesh screen will block out most of the debris, so it's clean enough to store, obviously not potable. And then in the container that it's in should also be screened so that mosquitoes can't get in, because you will have a mosquito problem and we don't want that. In terms of storage, it's fine to keep it, like I have a system of 10 rain barrels tied together. So it's about 550 gallons. And so that fills up over the winter. And then I use it for kind of hand watering plant pots and things through the summer. And so I keep it stored throughout the summer and use it before I'll try and empty it before it starts to rain again. And it gets a little funky because I've got
Mhm.
a lot of oak trees. So there's some tannins and things that get in there. But it's it's fine. The nice thing about using rainwater is it really is compared to tap water. It's kind of salt free, and so plants love rainwater. So if you are able to use it, it's a great resource. And I will talk a little bit more about rainwater as we move through.
Yeah, thank you. No, that's actually a very insightful to think about. And actually thinking about putting some sort of screen over the system is something I should think about and will look into doing as well.
Yeah,
And I also really appreciated you going over the ideas of having like master gardeners come to your area and check out your plants and actually help set up the systems and actually having you have someone to come look at irrigation systems. I know that's always a tricky question for many gardeners, especially from the beginner gardeners to the more advanced gardeners. Understanding a irrigation system is a lot.
yeah, it can be intense, and the thing we see quite a bit as well is the over time, a system may have been well set up, but over time, the sun is a harsh environment in California and degrades plastic components, and so things can crack and break and cause leaks. And so, kind of looking after those systems over time is super important.
Yeah, wonderful. Well, I'll let you get back to the incentive programs, but thank you for answering those questions. If anyone else has any, send them into the Q&A. Thank you.
Cool. All right. Okay, so we're jumping into incentive programs that Marin Water offers to our customers. So marinwater.org/rebates. And almost all of these are landscape specific. There are a few others we offer. And so I'm just going to run through. The first one is actually not landscape specific. It is called the Flume, and this is what they call a smart home water monitor. But for the most part in Marin, we have conventional water meters, which we read bi-monthly, which means that you only really see your water use and the cost of that every other month, which is a long time, especially if there's a leaky toilet or leaking irrigation valve. It adds up quick. And so what this device does is you strap a sensor around your water meter, as you see on the top right, and then there is a Wi-Fi bridge that you plug in at home, connect to your Wi-Fi, and then these two things send data up to the cloud, and you have an app on your phone where you can access data, and it's providing you then pretty much real-time water use data. So you can see the flow rate if you turn on the hose, or if you turn on your irrigation system, you can see the flow rate. And then it provides you with a series of charts so you can see your water use by hour or even for shorter times than that. So you can see when you're using more water, how much water your irrigation is using versus showering. It actually tries to disaggregate your end use of water, which is pretty cool. And then one of the coolest things on it is that it provides leak alerts. So it will send you a notification if it detects continuous water use. And then you can also set up other types of alerts like high flow alerts. So for example, if you had a sprinkler system and somebody ran over a sprinkler and then it was gushing water for a certain amount of time, the system could send you an alert, which is super useful. So these things are regularly $250. And we have what's called a direct distribution program. So you're purchasing directly from Flume. It's not a rebate, so it's very easy. You just enter your customer number and you can purchase this thing for $75 plus tax and shipping. And then once you have activated it, Flume will reimburse you $25. So it's one of my favorite programs that we have. We get great feedback from customers, You do need to be a little bit techie in that it requires installation and a phone app. And then bear in mind that the sensor is battery operated. So about every year or sometimes 2 years, you need to replace the batteries in the sensor. Okay, so we were talking about irrigation scheduling, and generally speaking, there's two types of irrigation controllers: conventional ones that you program, and then if you want to change any times on it, you have to go in and change those times. They are well known for not being super user friendly, and what we find in an area like ours is it's like a bell curve. So in the peak being July and August is when plants need the most supplemental irrigation. And then in the shoulder seasons, the beginning in April and at the end in October, watering should be about 40 or 50% of what it would be in the summer months. You can make those adjustments manually if you're so inclined, or you can purchase a weather-based irrigation controller or a smart controller, as they're frequently referred to. And we have two options to make this investment a lot less expensive. We have a $100 rebate for any WaterSense labeled controller. And WaterSense is similar to Energy Star for water using fixtures. It's an EPA program. And so there are a lot of those, and you can search on the WaterSense website for ones that have that label. And then we have another direct purchase program with a company called Ratio, and they have 3 different models with a different number of stations. The Ratio is great if you love doing things from your phone. The device itself doesn't have any physical buttons. And so if you're comfortable with that, and you're comfortable using it from your phone, that's a great option. If you prefer something with physical buttons, there are plenty of other options available through the rebate program. So if you have a landscaper who programs your controller, then you might want to opt for something with physical buttons because that's often their preference. Otherwise, they've got to kind of get your login details or etc. to be able to program your controller for you. And in general, it's normally about a 10% water savings by investing in a smart controller. So definitely something that pays for itself over time. Okay, so we're moving on to lawn replacement. And this is something that many water utilities do because lawns are often not used very much, and they use a lot of water. They're also energy intensive because we tend to put quite a lot of chemicals on them to keep them nice and weed free, and then we tend to mow them often with inefficient power equipment, although sometimes these days with battery operated equipment. And so lots of reasons to change. They're also not providing a whole lot of habitat for our native wildlife. And there are plenty of other plants that do that. And I think you guys know of a good garden center to visit to help you with plant choice. And so we have what we call our Cash for Grass program, where we will give you a certain amount of money per square foot of lawn that you replace with more sustainable landscaping. And you do need to apply for this program before you do this work. We do a pre-inspection where we confirm you have a lawn and measure the area. And then we will run through the program requirements with you. And then you do your project. It can be DIY. You can be working with a landscaper. We see all kinds of things. And we've replaced about, I've forgotten the number. I think it's about 500,000 square feet in the few years we've been offering this program. So it was super popular during the 2021 drought and continues to be popular. And then once you've done your project, we come back out and do a post inspection, and then we agree the square footage with you, sign off, and then send you a check in the mail for the project. So depending on what you're doing, if you're doing something really basic and DIY, we can almost cover your costs sometimes. If you're doing something more adventurous, then we will be contributing to the cost of your project. But I think it's something we're seeing happen more and more. A lot of these new landscapes have a lot more curb appeal than the somewhat dated looking lawns, often which don't look very well taken care of. So it's a good opportunity to jump on board and also see your water usage decline as a result. So there's two tiers, $1.50 or $3. $1.50 for our standard rebate gives you more flexibility to do what you want to do. And then the best practices rebate is we've tried to take sustainable landscaping elements and incorporate those into the program requirements so that you get rewarded for having a more sustainable landscape environment. So for both programs, we do require a biodegradable weed barrier if you're using a weed barrier. Most landscape fabric is made of materials like polypropylene, and when exposed to the sun, it tends to break down, and then when it rains, it tends to wash into the storm drain and suboptimal. So we're trying to discourage the use of landscape fabric. We require a 3-inch layer of mulch, obviously outside of the immediate area around the perimeter of the house for fire safety, but in any kind of less densely planted areas. Drip irrigation instead of sprinklers, because it's a more efficient way. You're losing a lot less to overspray and runoff typically, and it's able to be directed at the plant root zone rather than generally broadcast into the general area. And then any plants you put in the ground need to be low water use, and we have resources to figure out what that means. But generally speaking, there will be your more plants from Mediterranean climates. A lot of California natives require very little supplemental irrigation, and you'll find that once these landscapes get established, you might actually only need to water them a couple of times during the summer. I have a front yard in Santa Rosa, so not too far away, and I don't have an irrigation system in my front yard. I do a little bit of hand watering from time to time, and it definitely looks a little sad in the hottest months. But boy, in the spring, when we've had a good amount of rainfall, it takes off and blooms like crazy in that natural cycle that we have of what we call a summer dry climate. Then for the best practices, a few more requirements. So sheet mulching in place, which means not cutting the lawn out and removing it, because that has to go to landfill. And then planting mostly California native plants and including an alternative water source. The simplest way to do that is to direct water from a downspout into a depression in the landscape and call it a rain garden. But it can also be a rain system of 200 gallons or more, or a gray water system. So lots to digest there, and staff, when they come out to do your pre-inspection, will make sure all of these things are well understood, and we also have a little guide we provide participants with to help them through the project. Okay. Next up, we have gray water. And we focus here on laundry to landscape. So gray water is water that is produced in our homes, which can be reused on site. So that could be water from bathtubs, showers, bathroom sinks, and washing machines. It does not include, I think that one of the areas that is a little bit of a gray area is kitchen sinks, just because the fats and grease that tend to go down kitchen sinks aren't suitable for putting in a landscape, or dishwashers. And then hopefully, obviously, toilets is not something we call gray water. So gray water can be used to irrigate many plants, and a lot of plants actually love gray water. Generally speaking, you would avoid using it to irrigate root vegetables like carrots and beetroots, but it can definitely be used for things like fruit trees and even things like tomatoes, and then any other landscape plants. Because and because it tends to have soap in it, it tends to be slightly alkaline. And so for that reason, I also wouldn't recommend irrigating acid-loving plants with gray water, but there are plenty of plants to choose from. Our focus is on laundry to landscape, and the reason for that is it's one of the simplest ways to reuse gray water. It doesn't involve cutting into your home plumbing, and therefore doesn't require a plumbing permit. But the plumbing code does have a series of guidelines on how to do this safely and effectively. But essentially, you install a three-way valve behind the laundry machine, and that can direct the water into the landscape or into the sewer. So you still have that option if, for example, you are washing dirty diapers or using bleach or something more potent than a natural laundry detergent. And then it goes out into the landscape, and it stays in a pretty big, flexible 1-inch pipe, and then goes down into half-inch pipe that we usually use in drip systems. It doesn't go into a drip emitter usually because we want the hair and the lint and all that good stuff to go into the landscape. And then it's delivered into little basins close to the plants, which are filled with wood chips. And that gives the water somewhere to land and get filtered into the soil. The roots of the plants are amazing. They will find the water. The soil is amazing. It's full of life that treats the water. And so it's kind of a win-win, and it's water you're producing that can be used in your landscape year-round, which is pretty cool. So we have a $125 discount when you purchase a laundry to landscape kit through the Urban Farmer Store located in Mill Valley. And there's an application on our website where we gather a bit more information about your project to qualify for that voucher. Okay, so coming back around to rainwater harvesting, and when we talk about rainwater harvesting, we're generally talking about capturing water from roof surfaces because we generally have a system of gutters and downspouts, and often those are directing water they're often connected to the street and go straight out into the storm drain. So one way to use this water is to, what we say, disconnect those downspouts and direct them into rain gardens. And that is an excellent way to really charge your soil at the beginning of at the end of spring, the beginning of summer, so you can delay irrigation. Another way is to actually store water in barrels or cisterns. If you do this with barrels, it's great to actually try and empty those as soon as you can, ready for the next rain cycle. And if you have a large cistern, you're trying to capture that water during the winter so that you can then use it through the summer. And we see people installing cisterns of anywhere from a few hundred gallons all the way up to 5,000 gallons is what you can do generally without a building permit. And so then those 5,000 gallon tanks are sometimes tied together to provide even more storage. For most homes, the production of rainwater, so the amount you could capture, is more than you're likely to be able to capture. So I've got an example here that a 1,000 square foot roof would provide 600 gallons of runoff with just a 1-inch rain. And so there's a tremendous amount of this resource. The issue is that we need to store it during the rainy season for use in the dry season. But it is an excellent thing to do. And we see some advanced systems where They will even have a float switch inside the tank, so that once the tank is dry, if it's hooked up to an irrigation system, it will refill with potable water during the remainder of the summer until it gets rain again. So we provide 50 cents a gallon up to $1,000, so up to a 2,000 gallon tank. And then we do require the system be installed per California plumbing code. As we were talking about earlier, that includes things like having a sign on it saying it's non-potable water, making sure it's screened for mosquitoes, and then there are some other guidance relating to tank sizing and dimensions. Water is extremely heavy, and so making sure that this thing is stable and safe is really important. And then you'll also see on the example here that there is an overflow pipe. And so one of the things that the overflow pipe should be at least as big as the inlet, so that once this thing is full, it just doesn't start spilling over the top. It actually gets directed, ideally into a feature in your landscape like a rain garden. One thing that's unique to our service area is that, or at least not part of the general California plumbing code, is that if the system is pressurized and put through a pump to go into an irrigation system, then you do need to have a backflow prevention device at the water meter, so that if there is a cross connection, the water supply is protected. And that is the conclusion of me running through the incentive programs. So happy to field any questions that come up, and my contact info is there if you'd like to reach out at a future date.
Oh, thank you, Greg. That was amazing. I didn't realize there were so many different ways of actually like getting money back and all these different systems that you have in place that anyone can utilize, and especially in your area. I do have a question that is maybe you can't fully pertain or like talk about because you're from the Marin Water Department, but areas like I live in San Francisco and a few areas around the kind of Bay Area and out from there, are there very similar things in place that we can look towards for different kinds of incentives and stuff that maybe we should look towards?
Yeah, absolutely. The the team I work with is part of a pretty small industry, and all of the water utilities do speak to each other. We learn from each other's programs, what's working, what's not working. So in San Francisco, I know, where there tends to be a little less outdoor water use because of landscape size. But they have actually, they definitely have a rainwater harvesting and a gray water program for sure. And they actually have the picture I had on the slide is from the San Francisco Rainwater Harvesting Manual. And they have a similar thing for gray water, which is a manual that they've put together to actually help customers do these projects if you're doing it DIY, and explain how it should be done. So and I think we use some of their resources on our website. And then throughout the Bay Area, if you're a water utility, you generally have some of these programs just because it's such an important piece of what we do. So East Bay Municipal Water District and Contra Costa Water District all have very similar things.
Definitely, yeah. Especially in our areas, and all talks of going through the drought and all these, water conservation efforts. I think it's wonderful that we have things that we can utilize, and I'm definitely going to look towards it because I know I've tried to do some rainwater stuff, but nothing really actually set up in a very good proper way. And so I'm going to look towards that, and even maybe set up a rainwater system. I was really fascinated by the idea of a rain garden, was what you were saying, is where the excess of the water kind of goes to. So I'm guessing it's plants that really utilize and love an extra amount of water. And I think that's a nice thing for a garden, that if you have a space that the water ends up going anyway, or an area that you does maybe end up with the pooling, or if you actually direct the water towards it, have plants there that maybe utilize that better, and you get a cool feature. But you're also not, spreading those maybe high water loving plants into areas of the garden that maybe wouldn't get as much water. So it's a cool way of setting up your area. I was also really enjoying your talk about lawn replacement. I think many of our customers and many people that come into our store look for alternatives to lawns as that culture has slowly changed and shifted in our area. And I think it's a really nice kind of way of thinking about, you know, what can you get out of your space instead of just having a lawn. What kind of native plants can you bring in? What kind of cool plants can you also bring in? All the different fauna that you can also cultivate in your area and create habitats for. So I appreciate the talk on that and resources on how to actually maybe approach that in a really good way. And you also mentioned something or sheet mulching in place, and I wanted to maybe could you just do like a brief explanation of really what that means? Because when you said it, I wasn't really sure what you meant.
Yeah. So when replacing a lawn, there's really three ways to do this. One is to physically cut out the lawn. But because what you're cutting out is sand, silt, and clay, it's soil, it's not something that should really go into the green waste bin because it's minerals. And so it kind of ends up going to landfill. And then also, you know, you've just removed some of your topsoil, which is another precious resource in itself. A second way to do it is called solarization, and that is to basically cover the lawn with plastic sheeting, clear plastic sheeting over the summer, and it gets super hot, which kills the lawn. The downside to that is, again, landfill, because the plastic will be damaged by the sun, so it tends not to be reusable after doing this, and so then you've just created a bunch of plastic landfill in a short space of time. So sheet mulching is what we consider to be the most ecologically sound way of replacing a lawn, and so you leave the lawn in place. If it needs mowing, you mow it down, and you leave all of that green material on the lawn. Generally, you want to pay attention to the edges, so you might cut around the edges and then a few inches so that when you put mulch on, it's not going to go onto the sidewalk or onto your pathways. It's going to have something to sit against. And you can use that material to give the landscape some three-dimensional shape. So you can create little depressions and or little berms, so that then if you're planting plants which really don't want to have wet feet, like a manzanita or something, you can plant that on a mound rather than somewhere where it might get wetter. So once you've done that, you cover the lawn in cardboard, which is a biodegradable weed barrier. You can collect it for free from appliance stores and things, or you can buy it in rolls from landscape supply stores. On top of the cardboard, and then generally you want to kind of wet that down a bit so it stays in place. You would put a couple of inches of compost, and you don't need to work the compost in. You're just putting it on top. Over time, all of the wonderful soil life is going to bring that compost down into the soil, which is going to improve the water holding capacity as well as just everything about the soil. And then on top of the compost, you put a 3-inch layer of mulch, and usually that would be some form of wood chips. Often these are produced from our yard waste, and sometimes there are composted wood chips, which FireSafe Marin recommend as the least flammable mulch product. And the idea of that is it's doing a couple of things. One is it's completely blocking out light so that you're smothering the lawn. And then secondly, it's keeping moisture in, so you'll reduce your irrigation requirement over time, losses through evaporation. And then it also does help reduce weed seed germination and prevent weed seeds from getting down into the soil. So once you've done it, it's great to let it sit and just hang out for a while. Ideally, let some rain. So now is an ideal time to do it. And then once we get some rain, you can either plant right into it, or you could wait until the spring and plant into it once it's had a chance to kind of take effect, as it were. And what will happen is all those grass clippings and everything will decompose, and the lawn will be smothered. I would say it's a practice which works best with a cool season turf grass. If you have a warm season turf grass, so like a Bermuda grass, especially, that stuff can be extremely tenacious. It has these underground runners which pop up all over the place, and so you might have to do some ongoing maintenance to make it take effect. I have had it work with sections of Bermuda grass, but I haven't done it for an entire lawn. So uh, it is a challenging plant to be rid of.
Yeah. No, wow. Thank you. That's actually a really great explanation of actually how to approach that topic, because it's a bit of a process, but it's very doable, and something that can really have a good effect in the end. You're also mentioning, and really interesting, how gray water is more on the alkaline side, and how to utilize that within your garden, knowing that stuff. I was also wondering, when you have a system of a roof to rainwater, like you're saying, showing in that kind of graphic, is there anything that someone has to worry about, or maybe initially set up, to make sure that the particles or the materials that are in the roof or on the roof are not harmful to the water or the garden water they're using?
Yeah, I mean, roof surface can be a factor. Um, Generally speaking, uh, just simple screening is enough to make sure that it's not going to be harmful to your plants. And so there's normally when you do this downspout diversion, there's a thing called a leaf eater, which is just a simple screen thing. And then I have a second screen where it goes into the tank, and that blocks out, little particles that come off the roof, as well as leaves and other debris. Um, the cleanest type of roof would be, like a metal roof. But the fact is, most of us don't have that, and it hasn't been found to be an issue to use water collected off a composite roof in the landscape.
Okay, cool. Well, thank you. That kind of gone through most of my questions. I want to thank you again for your wonderful presentation on all the different kinds of things that people can do to utilize, water safe and also water conscious kind of gardens, as well as all the different rebates and incentives that they can utilize to gain a little bit of money back for also doing a good thing. So I think it's a win-win for a lot of us, and I hope anyone who's watching this can utilize some of those resources.